Hello my dear students, it's a pleasure to meet you in our educational program of Geology and Environmental Sciences. I'd like to remind you, last time we talked about the different ecosystems, marine and terrestrial ecosystem. In our today's program, we'll continue talking about the limits and the depletion of the natural resources. Let's start with the following. Depletion of the natural resources. Depletion of the natural resources and destruction of the environment becomes an urgent problem that should be faced to stop it and to remedy its effects. There are several aspects of depletion and squanderance of the resources, such as erosion and changing the forests and the agricultural lands into urban areas, and the effect of these on the extinction of the living species. In the following we will deal with some of these depletions. The depletion of the natural renewable resources. The interaction between man and the environment is as old as the appearance of the human race on the planet Earth. Since the settlement of man in the environment, it satisfied his need and desires as a result of trying to satisfy the different human needs. With the high increase in population, stress on the environment was increased by depleting its resources. Scientists became aware of the harmful effect of the misusing the resources of the environment and realized the necessity of economizing and economization in its consumption. In fact, man exploits the environmental resources extravagantly to the extent that some of it are about to be depleted. Man starts to suffer from the direct and indirect effect of his misuse the natural resources. In the following we will mention some examples of this and its effect on him and on the environment. Depletion of agricultural soil. This is one of the important depletions occurred by the man effect. The agricultural soil in the Nile Valley was built through millions of years by the immortal river carrying clay that it brings from the Ethiopian mountains. The ancient Egyptians used to cultivate the land only once a year after the flood of the Nile. We now make lots of mistakes that cause the depletion of the agricultural soil, as the following steps: the generalization of the planting a single crop in the same soil year after year. This led to weakening the soil and depriving it from some nutrients elements like the nitrogens, which is very important for the plants. The use of the manufactured chemical fertilizers instead of organic fertilizers led to the deterioration of the soil by changing its physical characteristics and made it more liable to erosion. The overuse of pesticides led to the disappearance of some useful insects. As you see, my dear students, these are chemical pesticides which are very harmful to the animals living and to the plants itself. As you see, that feed on harmful ones leading to the later becoming agriculture base, because we use these chemical fertilizers that kill the useful bases, and by the way, the harmful ones start to spread. Pesticides result in the loss of nodular bacteria that are important for fixing the atmospheric nitrogen and the death of earthworms that aerate the soil and make nitrogen available. The agricultural land in Egypt was exposed to big destruction process, where the manufacture of red brick is from the upper layer of the agricultural land soil. The dredging unfit soil formed during millions of years at a time of stable devoted to increase agricultural area. Also, the dredging process. Now we have another example, which is the spreading of urbanization. Since the beginning of this century, the population in Egypt increased gradually and greatly, to the extent that the rate of the population's growth become more than 1.25 million annually. The increase in population resulted in the increase in the needs for food, clothing, and housing, besides the need for services such as building schools, hospitals, and others. In order to make food available, the government started projects of agrarian reforms. But people crowded over the fertilized green land to build houses and projects. Thus, for the areas of land that is reclaimed on one side, and equivalent area of fertilized productive land on the delta and valley lost. Thus, the urban areas are increased on the expanse of the surrounding agricultural land. Thus, we can say that in return for the reclaimed areas, with the help of the high dam, the Egyptian person has squandered rich land that was producing much more in spite of the high cost of land reclamation. The spread of urbanization over the cultivable land has been responsible for the loss of almost 30,000 faddan of our limited agricultural land annually. Now, my dear students, how we can treat the problem of soil depletion. We can avoid growth of one crop for 2 consecutive years and follow the crop rotation system, regulating the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Agriculture waste is converted to organic fertilizers. Also, converting organic materials and the garbage into organic fertilizers. Brick manufactures from shale, cement, sand, and other materials instead of agricultural soil. Establishment of new cities in uncultivated desert land, and the establishment of industrial projects, providing facilities, housing, schools, and various services in new cities. The use of synthetic fibers instead of cotton to provide land to grow grain. Issuing laws that prohibit depletion of agricultural land. Issued state legislation that prohibit building on agricultural land. My dear students, we have another depletion coming now from the tree cutting, overcutting of trees. Trees have several benefits to the environment. In industrial areas, they act as a natural screen for carbon dioxide, besides providing us with oxygen. In agricultural areas, besides the previous effects, it acts as windbreakers for protecting the other plants and providing shade and wood. In the forest, it sheds its leaves periodically. These shedded leaves decompose, forming humus, which nourishes the soil and keeps its fertility. Forests are renewable resources. When man cuts lots of its trees to get both wood and cellulose necessary for paper and textile industry. These are and moving toward drought. This is very clear in North Africa and Middle East, where one notices clearly the effect of drought on the natural vegetation and the cultivated plants and on the life of man. The negative effect of the overcutting of trees. Reduction in the amount of raw material necessary for man industries, such as wood, industrial fibers, and paper. Vanishing of animals that live in the forest and the destruction of the ecosystem. Weakening of the soil due to its exposure to drought conditions. Exposing the areas around the overcut forests to floods. Temperature rise due to the increase in carbon dioxide. The elimination of the ecosystem. Now, my dear students, the treatment of the overcutting of trees. We have several steps. If we cut the trees in a certain area of the forest, we should plant instead new ones, thus conserving the forests as ecosystem, which is the most stable one. Expansion in the cultivation of the tree around the cities to establish a green belt for each city. Use of agricultural and industrial wastes, substitution for wood. Now, my dear students, let's go to another depletion in our environment, which is the overgrazing. Natural grazing fields provide food for cattle, herbs that man raise, and depends on animal wealth that provide him with protein nutritions. Overgrazing leads to the deterioration of the natural vegetation, which is always accompanied with the destruction of the soil and the local weather. If the deterioration occurs repeatedly, the soil erodes and then becomes liable to severe erosion by rainwater and wind. At last, the grazing lands become arid lands unable to absorb rainwater, and the soil gets dry, especially at the slopes, due to its inability to absorb rainwater. My dear students, the negative impact of overgrazing. We have the following: demise of plants suitable for grazing and the survival of other plants. degradation of natural vegetation, which always accompanied soil and local climate degradation, emergence of erosion and subject to the safe soil erosion by wind and rain water. Soil dry barrier land became unable to absorb rainwater, especially on slopes. The decreased spreading phenomena, it means desertation, as happened in the North Coast region in the earliest Romans. Grazing in the grass areas erodes the vegetation and the dominance of the unusual species with short life cycle, where animal cannot eliminate them. When grazing is organized, grass growth rate is more than the rate of consumption. The organized animal grazing will be beneficial in reduction of the rate of transpiration and evaporation by removing parts of the shoot system. The grazing areas of trees and shrubs, causing an increase in the number of the trees as a result of the removal of weeds that compete for water. Now, my dear students, what are the examples of the degradation of natural grasslands? The northern coast was used to overlooking the sheep grazing in the past, but the deterioration and the dry today and the result of overgrazing and the increase of population in Mediterranean Sea, that the Saudi desert also has suffered from overgrazing through several centuries. It was transformed from an area covered with natural vegetation capable of regenerating itself continuously to a deteriorated area. Consequently, the country lost large areas of grazing land. What can we do with this problem? How can we treat this overgrazing problem? Establishment of fish farms and crustaceans to provide protein. Conversion of agricultural wastes to feed. Conversions of byproducts of some industries to the feed industries. The overhunting of wild animals. My dear students, sometimes we heard about a lake or river that became void of fish, or that a species of fish disappeared from the sea. As a matter of fact, 45 species of birds disappeared in the 19th century and 20th century due to the chasing them with nets and advanced weapons. In these 2 centuries, about 40 species of mammals become extinct. The disappearance of animals is due to killing or hunting a group of it, to the extent that the remaining ones are very few in a number, thus unable to continue reproduction. Wild animals are hunted or killed to be used mainly as food. Besides, there are other reasons. Some of them are used to provide clothing, as the case is with the fur animals. The mink, for example, the first settler of America killed millions of American buffaloes, the beacon. How can we solve the problem of overhunting of wild animals? Establishment of nature reserve to preserve the rare species that threatened with the extinction, establishment of fish and shellfish farms to provide protein, issuing laws to criminalize hunting for species types and seasons and in certain age to allow their reproduction, raising awareness of the importance of wildlife protection and participating in the international conversation, rationalization of trees cutting and animal hunting in land and sea. Now, my dear students, let's go to another depletion problem, which is overconsumption of water. Fresh water represents only 1% of the surface water on the earth, since sea and ocean water represented 97%, and the ice at the poles represents the rest 2%. This means that the amount of fresh water is very limited. The life of the living organisms in the biosphere depends on this limited amount of fresh water. In Egypt, we depend on the Nile water. Also, some other African countries depend on it. So, agreements were signed allowing certain amount of the Nile water to each country. Despite that, we extravagant in using this water through irrigation by submersion and the unwise human use. If we add to this the increase in number of consumers during the increase in population, we realize the need for economizing and on consumption through irrigation by dripping and the wise personal use of water. Thus, we can use what we save from the river's water for new cultivation areas. Rationalizing the water consumption and contaminations. Avoiding irrigation by submersion and using spraying or dripping methods for water saving. Saving water to use in land reclamation. Avoiding water squanderance in personal use. Searching for new source of water as underground water and water desalinations. How can we solve the problem of water contamination and overconsumption? This is through rationalizing consumption through drip or spray irrigation, and use saved river water in the cultivation of new areas. Now, my dear students, let's go to this question: how can we combat pollution of the Nile? Determining the allowed proportion of population on the Nile River. This is an important step. A choice of pesticides and fertilizers that do not pollute water channels. This is very important. Also, requiring factories by treating industrial wastes water before discharge into the Nile. Consumptions in respect of the water channels and remove the causes of pollution. Now, my dear students, the depletion of the natural non-renewable resources. We have some depletions in non-renewable resources like minerals, mineral depletion. Minerals are non-renewable resources that man exploits in different aspects of his life activities. We all know the use of iron, copper, aluminum, zinc, gold, platinum, and others that are found in the Earth's crust but with population increases and progress of technology, the industry share of minerals, cars, equipment, tools, installation minerals, currency, and different things is increasing with a very high rate that reaches almost triple the rate of population increase. Studies have confirmed that the amount of minerals remaining in the earth is disappeared rapidly. This supports the idea that we should find a substitution for minerals. Scientists recommend the recycling of minerals through melting the manufactured metals that are no longer suitable for use and reshaping them. Now, my dear students, the question is, how can we solve the problem of mineral depletion? We have some steps like using plastics in the piping industry instead of minerals, using of mud and feldspars in the pottery and ceramics cooking tools instead of minerals, recycling of automotive batteries after treatment, recycling plastics and glass water, recycling of minerals through melting the manufactured metals that are no longer suitable for use and reshaping it. Now, my dear students, we come to the end of our today's program. Until we meet next time, have my best wishes and goodbye.